Little girl shows up at his door. Can I clean your house for food? Billionaire CEO trembles when he sees who it is. Before we dive into this incredible story of unexpected connections, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. You're about to witness how one stormy night changed everything. Enjoy the story. The thunder crashed like the world was splitting apart outside Marcus Thompson's Beverly Hills mansion. At 45, the CEO of Thompson Industries had grown accustomed to storms, both the ones that raged outside his windows and the ones that had torn through his life for the past 18 years. Marcus sat hunched over financial reports in his mahogany-paneled study, the glow of his computer screen casting harsh shadows across his weathered face. $3 billion. That's what his empire was worth now. Built from nothing but determination and an obsession that had consumed every relationship he'd ever had. The divorce papers had been signed 15 years ago. No children, no family, just him and the endless pursuit of more money, more power, more of everything that couldn't fill the hollow ache in his chest. Lightning illuminated the mansion's empty halls as rain lashed against the tall windows. He'd sent his staff home hours ago, even in Beverly Hills. Storms like this demanded respect. The isolation felt heavier tonight, pressing down on him like the thick California air before an earthquake. His routine was mechanical. Review quarterly projections, analyze market trends, plan tomorrow's hostile takeover. The same robotic existence he'd perfected since losing everything that mattered. But at 9:30 p.m., something shattered his carefully constructed world. The doorbell rang. Not the gentle chime he was used to, but an insistent, desperate sound that cut through the storm's fury. Marcus frowned, glancing at his security monitor. The cameras showed nothing but rain and shadows. Who would venture out in weather like this? Who even knew where he lived? The bell rang again, longer this time, as if small fingers were pressing it with all their might. Marcus rose slowly, his joints protesting after hours bent over spreadsheets. Something in that sound, something urgent and vulnerable, pulled him toward the front door. As he walked through the marble foyer, thunder rolled overhead like a warning. He had no idea that on the other side of that door stood a little girl who would change everything. His hand hesitated on the brass handle. In 30 seconds, his carefully ordered world would crumble, and for the first time in decades, Marcus Thompson would discover what it meant to truly live. Marcus's hand trembled as he turned the heavy brass handle. The door swung open, and a gust of wind drove rain across his marble floor. But it wasn't the storm that stole his breath. It was the small figure standing in the darkness. A little girl, no more than 8 years old, stood shivering on his doorstep. Her clothes were soaked through, clinging to her tiny frame like a second skin. Dark hair plastered against her pale cheeks, and her lips had taken on a bluish tint from the cold. But it was her eyes that hit him like a physical blow. Piercing blue eyes that seemed far too old for such a young face. Eyes that looked at him with a mixture of desperation and dignity that made his chest tighten. There was something hauntingly familiar about those eyes, something that whispered at the edges of his memory. "Sir," she said, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I'm sorry to bother you so late." Marcus stood frozen, water pooling around his expensive Italian shoes. In 18 years of business, he'd faced down hostile boards, aggressive competitors, and ruthless investors. But this small, soaked child rendered him speechless. I can clean your house," she continued, straightening her shoulders with impressive courage. "I'm good at cleaning. I just need some food. I haven't eaten properly in 3 days." The words cut through him like ice. 3 days. This child hadn't eaten in 3 days. "Please," she whispered, and for the first time, her voice cracked. "I won't cause any trouble." Marcus's business instinct screamed warnings. This could be a scam, a setup, anything. But looking down at this small, shivering girl, all he could see was genuine desperation wrapped in heartbreaking bravery. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She hesitated, those haunting blue eyes searching his face as if trying to read his soul. "Emma." Lightning flashed behind her, illuminating her small figure against the vast darkness of the storm. In that moment, Marcus saw something that shattered every wall he'd built around his heart. A child who had nowhere else to go, standing in a hurricane, asking for nothing more than basic human kindness. "Come inside," he heard himself say. As Emma stepped across his threshold, leaving tiny wet footprints on the marble. Marcus had no idea he'd just invited destiny into his carefully controlled world. Those familiar blue eyes held secrets that would change everything he thought he knew about his past and his future. The contrast was jarring. This small, bedraggled child standing in Marcus's gleaming kitchen, her wet shoes squeaking against the polished granite floor. He watched, mesmerized, as Emma devoured the sandwich he'd hastily prepared, her manners surprisingly refined despite her obvious hunger. "Thank you," she said between bites, dabbing her mouth with the cloth napkin he'd provided. The gesture was so natural, so practiced, that it caught him off guard. This wasn't a child raised on the streets. "Where are your parents, Emma?" Marcus asked gently, settling into the chair across from her. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. Those blue eyes, God, why did they seem so familiar, darted away from his face. "Gone," she whispered. "Gone, where?" Emma's small hands began to shake. She set down her fork and pulled a worn backpack closer to her chest, clutching it like a lifeline. Marcus caught a glimpse of something inside, papers, maybe photographs, before she quickly zipped it shut. I don't want to talk about it," she said, her voice growing smaller. Marcus felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness. "It's okay. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to." Relief flooded her features. "Can I really stay tonight? Just tonight?" "Of course. There's a guest room upstairs." "No." The word burst out of her with startling intensity. Emma's face flushed. "I mean, could I maybe sleep on the couch in your library? I saw it when we walked through. I like books." Something about her reaction troubled him, but Marcus nodded. "Whatever makes you comfortable." Hours later, as the storm finally began to subside, Marcus found himself unable to sleep. He wandered toward the library, intending to check on Emma, when he heard her voice drifting through the partially opened door. She was talking in her sleep, her words fragmented and distressed. "Papai, the bad man came back. Don't hurt him. Marcus Thompson is good. Papai said so." Marcus froze in the hallway. His name. She'd said his full name, but how could she possibly know who he was? He'd never seen this child before in his life, or had he? Standing there in the darkness, listening to this mysterious girl murmur his name like a prayer, Marcus felt the first crack in the foundation of everything he thought he knew about his carefully ordered existence. Who was Emma, and why did those haunting blue eyes feel like looking into a ghost from his past? 5 days passed in a strange new rhythm that Marcus had never experienced. For the first time in 18 years, he found himself canceling business meetings. That would have been unthinkable before Emma's arrival. Instead, he watched this enigmatic child navigate his mansion with a curious blend of caution and familiarity. Emma was unlike any 8-year-old he'd ever encountered. She asked permission for everything: to use the bathroom, to touch a book, to sit in a particular chair. Yet beneath her careful politeness, Marcus glimpsed flashes of remarkable intelligence. "The stock market reports are on Channel 32, she mentioned casually while they ate breakfast, then immediately looked startled. By her own words, as if the knowledge had escaped without permission. Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. "How do you know about financial news?" Emma's face went pale. I don't know. Sometimes I remember things." These moments happened frequently. Emma would unconsciously use sophisticated vocabulary, then retreat into childlike behavior. When questioned, she spoke of honest business practices and good men versus bad men, with the certainty of someone repeating lessons learned long ago. But it was her nightmares that troubled Marcus most. Every night, she would cry out in her sleep, fragments of terror spilling into the darkness, "Don't hurt Daddy, and the bad man is coming back." When he'd comfort her, Emma would cling to him with desperate strength. But in the morning, she remembered nothing. On the 5th evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Emma suddenly looked up from her book. "You have kind eyes," she said softly, "like my daddy did. He always said there were good people in the world, even in business. He said Marcus Thompson was one of the good ones." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Emma, how did you know to come here? How did you know my name?" Fear flickered across her features, the same panic that surfaced whenever he pressed too hard about her past. When I was running, I asked people. I remembered the name. A nice lady told me where you lived." Marcus studied her carefully. The story felt incomplete, rehearsed. There were pieces missing, connections that didn't quite fit. But pushing Emma only caused her to withdraw further into herself. That night, unable to sleep, Marcus stood at his office window, staring out at the city lights. Somewhere in his past, this child existed. Those blue eyes, that unconscious knowledge of his world, the way she'd found him. It couldn't all be coincidence. Who was Emma really? And why did saving her feel less like charity and more like destiny? The breakthrough came on a quiet Sunday evening. Emma sat curled in the oversized leather chair by the fireplace, a half-finished puzzle spread across the coffee table. Marcus had learned that she found comfort in activities that kept her hands busy. It seemed too quiet, whatever storms raged in her young mind. "I ran away from the Hartwells," she said suddenly, her voice so soft he almost missed it. Marcus looked up from his laptop, careful not to appear too eager. The Hartwells. Emma's fingers traced the edge of a puzzle piece. "My foster family. They weren't mean, not like some of the others, but they didn't really want me either. I was just there." "How many families have you lived with, Emma?" "4. The word fell like a stone into still water. "They always send me back. The social workers say I'm difficult to place because I have nightmares and I don't like to talk about before." Marcus felt his heart constrict. Before what? Emma's hands stilled on the puzzle. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackling of the fire. When she finally spoke, tears tracked silently down her cheeks. "Before my mummy and daddy died. It was 3 years ago. I was only 5. Her voice broke on the last word. "Oh, sweetheart." Marcus set aside his laptop and moved to kneel beside her chair. "I'm so sorry. Everyone wants to know what happened, but when I try to remember, everything gets dark and scary. The nightmares get worse." She looked up at him with those haunting blue eyes. "Do you think there's something wrong with me? Is that why nobody keeps me?" The raw vulnerability in her voice shattered something inside Marcus. He reached out tentatively, and when she didn't pull away, he gently smoothed her hair. "There's nothing wrong with you, Emma. Nothing at all. Sometimes terrible things happen, and it takes time to heal from them. I just want someone who won't give up on me," she whispered. "Someone who won't send me away when I have bad dreams, or when I can't remember things right." Marcus found himself making a promise he'd never expected to make. "I won't send you away." Emma searched his face with the intensity of someone much older. "Do you mean it? Really?" "I mean it." For the first time since she'd arrived, Emma smiled, a genuine, radiant expression that transformed her entire face. In that moment, Marcus saw not just a traumatized child, but a glimpse of who she might become with love and stability. But even as warmth spread through his chest, questions nagged at him. 3 years ago, when Emma was 5, those familiar eyes, the way she'd known his name, who had her parents been? The nightmares intensified after Emma's confession. Marcus found himself becoming a reluctant expert on childhood trauma, reading articles late into the night about how to help a grieving child. He quietly arranged for a private tutor and consulted with child psychologists, determined to give Emma the stability she'd never had. But it was the content of her dreams that kept him awake, staring at the ceiling. "Don't hurt Daddy," she would scream, thrashing in her sleep. "The bad man is back. He promised he wouldn't come back." Marcus would rush to her side, finding her small body rigid with terror, her face pale and streaked with tears. During these episodes, fragments of memory would spill out like pieces of broken glass. "Daddy was on the phone," she whimpered one night, clinging to Marcus's shirt. He was angry, scared. He kept saying, "I won't let you destroy good people." Then the bad man came to our house. "What did the bad man look like?" Marcus asked gently, but Emma would only shake her head violently. "I can't see his face. It's always dark in my dreams." But on the 7th night, Emma bolted upright, her scream piercing the mansion's silence. "Victor Harrison. No, Victor, please don't hurt Daddy." Marcus went cold. Victor Harrison, his business partner of 15 years, his silent investor, the man who'd helped him build his empire. The name hung in the air like a toxic cloud. "Emma, where did you hear that name?" But she was already retreating into herself, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. I don't know. Did I say something I don't remember?" Marcus held her until she fell back asleep, but his mind raced. Victor Harrison. How could Emma possibly know Victor? The man barely socialized, kept to the shadows of their business dealings. Marcus couldn't recall ever mentioning him by name to anyone outside of boardroom meetings. The next morning, Marcus called his private investigator. "I need you to look into a child named Emma," he said quietly, watching through his office window as she played in the garden below. "Last name unknown, parents died 3 years ago, currently in the foster system. I need to know everything: her parents were, how they died, Any connection to my business associates? Should I be discreet about this inquiry, Mr. Thompson? Marcus watched Emma chase a butterfly, her laughter floating up through the glass. For a moment, she looked like any normal child, but those eyes, when she looked up at his window and waved, still held secrets that made his chest tight. Very discreet, he murmured, and fast. Something told him that whatever his investigator found would change everything. For both of them, the call came on a Tuesday morning while Emma was in her tutoring session. Marcus stepped into his private office, expecting routine business, but his investigator's voice carried an weight that made him sink into his chair. Mr. Thompson, I have the information you requested about Emma. You might want to sit down for this. I'm listening. Her full name is Emma Winters. Her father was Robert Winters. The name hit Marcus like a freight train. Robert Winters, his mentor, his former business partner, the man who had shaped his understanding of ethical business practices for 8 crucial years, the man who had died 3 years ago in what everyone believed was a tragic accident. That's impossible, Marcus whispered, but even as he said it, the pieces began falling into place. Those familiar blue Robert's eyes, the sophisticated vocabulary, the unconscious knowledge of financial markets, the way she'd spoken about good men in business. There's more. Sir Robert and Diana Winters died in a car accident in February 2020. Emma was 5 at the time. She's been in the foster system ever since. Marcus's hands trembled as memories flooded back. Robert mentioning his little daughter during their meetings. Brief glimpses of a small girl with blue eyes playing quietly in Robert's office during late evening consultations. Emma had been there, in the background of his professional life, just a child too young for him to pay attention to. Sir, are you still there? Yes, Marcus managed. Tell me about the accident. Single car collision, on a rainy night. Police ruled it mechanical failure, brake line rupture. But sir, there's something else you should know. According to my sources, Robert had scheduled a meeting with federal investigators for the week after he died. Something about financial irregularities he'd discovered. The room began to spin. What kind of irregularities? I'm still digging, but it involved suspected fraud within his business partnerships. Mr. Thompson, Emma didn't just randomly show up at your door. Her father spoke about you frequently, called you one of the good ones, according to neighbors I interviewed. She came looking for you specifically. Marcus ended the call in a daze. Little Emma, who had trusted him with her broken heart, was Robert's daughter. The man who had taught him everything about integrity and honor, who had been like a father to him in business, had died under suspicious circumstances, and now his daughter was sleeping under Marcus's roof, having nightmares about a bad man and screaming Victor Harrison's name in her sleep as understanding crashed over him. Marcus realized he wasn't just protecting an orphan child. He was harboring the key to a truth that someone had been willing to kill to keep buried. The daughter of his murdered mentor had found her way home. Marcus found Emma in the library, curled up with a book of fairy tales. She looked so small, so innocent, that his heart ached with the weight of what he now knew. When she looked up and smiled Robert's smile, he realized now Marcus felt like he was seeing a ghost. Emma, he said gently, settling into the chair beside her, I need to ask you something important. Her body tensed immediately, the familiar wariness creeping into her expression. Did I do something wrong? No, sweetheart, nothing wrong. Marcus chose his words carefully. I've been thinking about what you said about your parents mentioning my name. Emma, what was your daddy's full name? The book slipped from her small hands. For a long moment, she stared at him with those piercing blue eyes, and Marcus could see the internal struggle, the desire to trust warring with years of learned caution. You already know, don't you? She whispered finally. Marcus nodded. Slowly, Robert Winters. Your father was Robert Winters. Emma's face crumpled, and she launched herself into his arms with desperate force. Please don't send me away. Please, I know I should have told you, but I was scared you wouldn't want me if you knew. Hey. Marcus held her tight, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. I'm not sending you anywhere. But Emma, why were you scared to tell me? She pulled back, wiping her nose on her sleeve. Because Daddy worked with you, and then he died, and I thought maybe you wouldn't want to be reminded of sad things. The simple, heartbreaking logic of a traumatized child. Marcus cupped her face gently. Emma, your father was one of the best men I ever knew. He taught me how to be better, how to do business with honor, I could never think of you as a sad reminder. You're a gift. Really, really. But I need you to tell me the truth now. When you ran away from the Hartwells, how did you know where to find me?" Emma bit her lip. "I remembered coming here when I was little. Not very much. Just impressions. And I remembered Daddy saying your name a lot. Always good things. When I got scared and needed somewhere safe, I asked people about Marcus Thompson. An old lady at a bus stop told me rich people lived in Beverly Hills, and she gave me directions." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "You came here based on a 5-year-old's memory and the kindness of a stranger." Emma nodded solemnly. "Daddy always said you were one of the good ones. Even when he was upset about work stuff near the end, he never said bad things about you. I figured if I could find you, maybe you'd help me." As Marcus held Robert's daughter, understanding crashed over him like a tidal wave. She hadn't just stumbled onto his doorsteps, she had sought him out, trusting in her father's judgment, even through the fog of childhood trauma. But if Robert had been upset about work stuff before he died, and if Emma was having nightmares about Victor Harrison, Marcus was beginning to understand that Emma might be the key to uncovering a truth far darker than he'd imagined. That night, after Emma was safely asleep, Marcus locked himself in his study and began the most important investigation of his life. For years, he'd trusted Victor Harrison implicitly, the silent partner who'd helped finance his early ventures, who preferred to stay in the shadows while Marcus took the spotlight. Now, with Robert's warnings echoing in his mind, Marcus examined their partnership with fresh eyes. He pulled up 15 years of contracts, financial records, and correspondence. What he found made his blood run cold. Pattern after pattern emerged like a spider's web of deception. Victor had consistently pushed for Marcus to sign documents quickly, always with logical-sounding explanations about time-sensitive opportunities and routine paperwork. "Just sign here, Marcus. You know I handle the boring details so you can focus on the big picture." How many times had Victor said those exact words? How many documents had Marcus signed without thorough review, trusting his partner's expertise? Marcus's hands shook as he cross-referenced investment portfolios with client lists. Names jumped out at him, prominent investors who'd lost substantial sums in ventures that had supposedly failed. But according to the bank records Marcus was now accessing for the first time, many of those failed investments had actually been profitable. The money had simply been redirected. At 3 a.m., Marcus discovered the most damning evidence yet. In a folder buried deep in their shared server, a folder he'd never noticed before. Work. Financial projections for investments that Robert Winters had specifically warned against. Investments that had cost Robert's personal clients millions. There was an email thread between Victor and an unnamed associate, dated just days before Robert's death. "The Winters problem needs permanent resolution. He's asking too many questions about the Hartford portfolio. If he goes to the feds, we're all finished." Marcus stared at the screen until his eyes burned. Robert hadn't died in an accident. He'd been murdered because he'd discovered what Marcus was, only now seeing that Victor had been using Thompson Industries as a front for massive fraud. And Marcus, the respectable face of their partnership, had been the perfect unwitting accomplice. His phone buzzed with a text from Victor. "Board meeting tomorrow at 10. New investment opportunity to discuss. Time-sensitive need. Your signature ASAP." The same language Victor had always used. The same manipulation that had worked for 15 years. But now Marcus understood the game. Victor wasn't just his business partner, he was a predator who had used Marcus's reputation to lure in victims like Robert Winters. And when Robert had threatened to expose the truth, Victor had silenced him permanently. Marcus's chest tightened as he thought of Emma sleeping upstairs, an innocent child whose father had died trying to protect others from the monster Marcus had unknowingly enabled. Tomorrow, Marcus would sit across from Robert's killer and pretend nothing had changed. But everything had changed. For the first time in his life, Marcus Thompson had something worth fighting for that wasn't measured in dollars. He had a daughter to protect and a father's murder to avenge. Marcus barely slept, but when morning came, he was ready. He contacted a discreet team of forensic accountants, the best money could buy, and gave them full access to every Thompson Industries file. If Victor had been stealing for 15 years, Marcus would find every stolen penny. The board meeting felt surreal. Victor sat across the polished conference table, his silver hair perfectly styled, his smile as warm and trustworthy as always. For 15 years, Marcus had seen this man as a mentor, a friend, Now he saw a predator wearing a mask. "Marcus, you look tired," Victor said with apparent concern. "Everything all right at home?" The casual question felt loaded with meaning. Did Victor know about Emma? Marcus forced his expression to remain neutral. "Just working late. You know how it is, indeed. Speaking of work, I have some excellent opportunities that require immediate action." Victor slid a folder across the table. "The Pemberton Group is looking to invest significantly, but they need signatures by end of business today." Marcus opened the folder, recognizing the familiar pattern. Complex documents, technical language, and Victor's reassuring smile urging quick action. How many Robert Winters had fallen victim to this exact presentation? "This seems rushed," Marcus said carefully. "Perhaps we should have our legal team review." "Marcus," Victor's tone sharpened slightly. "We've been partners for 15 years. When have I ever steered you wrong?" The Pemberton Group specifically requested discretion. Too much scrutiny might spook them. There it was, the subtle manipulation Marcus had fallen for countless times. But now he heard the threat beneath the friendly words. Sign quickly. "Don't ask questions. Trust me." "Of course," Marcus said, signing with a steady hand. "I trust your judgment completely." Victor's smile returned, but Marcus caught something, cold flickering behind his eyes. "Excellent. I'll get these processed immediately." After the meeting, Marcus retreated to his office and called his forensic team. The preliminary results were devastating. Over $200 million had been systematically stolen through shell companies and fake investments. The Pemberton Group didn't exist. It was another fictional entity designed to funnel money into Victor's offshore accounts. But the most horrifying discovery came from the digital forensics expert Marcus had hired separately. "Mr. Thompson, I've recovered deleted files from your shared server. There are communications between Victor Harrison and someone called the Cleaner dating back 3 years. The messages are coded, but the context is clear. They're discussing eliminating Robert Winters." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. "What kind of messages?" "Package delivered to RW's vehicle. Problem will resolve itself during next rainfall." The timestamp shows this was sent 2 days before the Winters accident. The brake lines, they'd sabotaged Robert's car and waited for the next storm to provide cover for the accident. "There's more, sir. Recent messages suggest they're monitoring someone named the Girl. I think they know about your houseguest." Ice flooded Marcus's veins. "Emma. They knew about Emma. His phone buzzed with another text from Victor. "Great meeting today. Looking forward to our continued partnership. By the way, I heard through the grapevine that you've taken in a foster child. How generous of you." The message was friendly, casual. But Marcus read the real meaning. "We know where she is." As evening approached, Marcus realized he was facing an impossible choice. He could contact the FBI, but that would take time Emma might not have. Victor had killed once to protect his secrets. He wouldn't hesitate to kill again. But Marcus had one advantage his former partner didn't know about. He finally understood the game they were playing, and this time, Marcus intended to win. Marcus spent the next week walking a tightrope between acting normal and secretly building an unshakable case. He installed state-of-the-art security around his mansion, hired discreet bodyguards who looked like household staff, and most importantly, he contacted FBI agent Sarah Chen, who specialized in financial crimes. "Mr. Thompson, these allegations are serious," Agent Chen said during their clandestine meeting in a downtown cafe. "If what you're telling me is true, we're looking at multiple federal charges for fraud, money laundering, and potentially murder." "I have 15 years of documentation," Marcus replied, sliding an encrypted drive across the table. "But I need guarantees about the child's safety. Emma is the only living witness to whatever happened before her parents died. We'll need her testimony eventually, but for now, keep her close and safe. We're going to need more evidence to make charges stick, preferably a confession or Victor incriminating himself on tape." Marcus nodded grimly. "I can arrange that." The opportunity came sooner than expected. Victor called that evening, his voice uncharacteristically urgent. "Marcus, we need to meet tonight. There's been a complication with the Pemberton investment. Can you come to the office around midnight? We need to discuss damage control." Marcus's blood chilled. Midnight meetings weren't Victor's style unless something had gone very wrong. "Of course. Is everything all right? Just bring the original. Pemberton contracts all of them, and Marcus's conversation stays between us." After hanging up, Marcus activated the recording device Agent Chen had given him and kissed Emma goodnight, his heart heavy with the knowledge that tonight would determine both their futures. The Thompson Industries building was eerily quiet at midnight. Marcus found Victor in the executive conference room, pacing like a caged animal. For the first time in 15 years, Victor's composure had cracked. "We have a problem," Victor said without preamble. "Someone's been asking questions about old investments, forensic accountants." "Marcus, did you hire forensic accountants?" Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Why would I do that? Our books are clean. Don't play games with me." Victor's mask had finally slipped, revealing the predator beneath. "I know you've been digging around, just like your mentor Robert Winters did." "Robert was my business partner, not my mentor," Marcus said carefully. Victor laughed bitterly. "Robert Winters was going to destroy everything we built. Asterisk. He discovered the Hartford redirections and threatened to expose 15 years of careful work. I tried to reason with him. Marcus, I really did." Marcus's pulse quickened. Victor was confessing. "What did you do?" "What I had to do. Robert forced my hand when he scheduled that meeting with federal investigators. A simple brake line adjustment during a rainstorm, tragic but effective." The casual way Victor described murder made Marcus's stomach turn. "You killed him. I protected our business. I protected you, Marcus. You think your reputation would have survived being exposed as the front man for a fraud operation. I saved your career, and his daughter," Marcus asked, thinking of Emma sleeping safely at home. "What about his daughter?" Victor's eyes glittered dangerously. "The girl has been problematic. Nightmares, fragments of memory from that night. She saw me at their house the week before the accident. If she ever remembers clearly, you'd kill a child. I'd protect our interests." Again, Victor stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But there's an easier solution, Marcus. The girl trusts you. One tragic accident, gas leak, perhaps, or another storm-related mishap, and our problems disappear. You'd be the grieving guardian who lost his ward to terrible misfortune." Marcus felt rage building in his chest like molten steel. "You're insane. I'm practical. And you're going to help me, Marcus, because if you don't, I'll make sure the world knows that Marcus Thompson was the willing accomplice who helped steal $200 million from innocent investors." Victor smiled, the same warm, trustworthy smile that had fooled Marcus for 15 years. But now Marcus saw it for what it truly was, the grin of a monster who would kill anyone who threatened his perfect crime. "So," Victor continued, "are we partners, or do I need to find another solution?" Marcus met his gaze steadily, thinking of Robert, of Emma, of all the victims whose trust had been betrayed. "We're partners," Marcus said. He was lying. Marcus left that midnight meeting with Victor's confession burning on the recording device hidden in his jacket. But as he drove home through the empty streets, he knew the real battle was just beginning. Victor wouldn't wait long before making his move against Emma, and Marcus needed the FBI to act fast. Agent Chen's response was swift and decisive. Within hours, a federal task force was assembled, and by dawn, they had enough evidence to proceed. But Victor Harrison was no amateur. He'd spent 15 years perfecting the art of staying in the shadows. "We need to be surgical about this," Agent Chen explained during the emergency briefing at Marcus's mansion. "Harrison has resources, connections, and most importantly, he knows we're coming. One wrong move, and he disappears forever." Marcus paced his study, glancing frequently toward the stairs where Emma was having her morning tutoring session, blissfully unaware of the danger surrounding her. "What do you need from me?" "We need more evidence. The confession is powerful, but a good lawyer might argue it was coerced or taken out of context. We need him to implicate himself in multiple crimes, preferably with witnesses." "You want me to wear a wire again?" "We want you to do more than that. We want you to help us catch him in the act." The plan was audacious and dangerous. Marcus would set up what appeared to be another fraudulent investment scheme, complete with fake investors and a fabricated urgency that would force Victor to reveal the full extent of his operation. The FBI would monitor everything, gathering evidence, while building toward Victor's arrest. But first, Marcus had to tell Emma the truth. He found her in the garden after her lessons, reading under the old oak tree that had become her favorite spot. She looked up when his shadow fell across her book, and those familiar blue eyes. Robert's eyes studied his face with intuitive concern. "You look worried," she said simply. Marcus sat beside her on the grass, choosing his words carefully. "Emma, I need to tell you something important. About your father, about why he died, and about the man who hurt him." Her small body went rigid. "The bad man from my dreams." "Yes, sweetheart. The bad man has a name, Victor Harrison. He was my business partner, but he was stealing money from good people. Your father found out and tried to stop him." Emma's book slipped from her hands. "That's why Daddy was scared those last weeks. He kept having phone calls that made him upset. Your father was very brave, Emma. He was trying to protect other families from being hurt. But Victor made sure your father couldn't tell anyone what he'd discovered." Tears began streaming down Emma's face, but her voice was steady. "He killed Daddy and Mummy." Marcus pulled her close, feeling the weight of a truth too heavy for any child to bear. "Yes, and now he knows you're here with me. He's afraid you might remember something that could get him in trouble." "I do remember," Emma whispered. "More than I told you. I remember Victor coming to our house. I remember hiding in the closet and hearing him argue with Daddy about money and papers. I remember Daddy telling him he was going to make sure Victor never hurt anyone again." Marcus felt his heart break and swell simultaneously. This brave little girl had been carrying these memories alone, protecting them even when they gave her nightmares. "Emma, the police want to catch Victor, but they need help. They need proof of what he did. Would you be willing to help them?" She looked up at him with those piercing blue eyes, and Marcus saw not just Robert's daughter, but a fierce determination that was uniquely her own. "Will it stop him from hurting other people?" "Yes." "Will it make sure he can never hurt you?" Marcus's throat tightened even in her fear. Emma was worried about protecting him. "Yes, sweetheart. It will stop him forever." Emma wiped her eyes and squared her small shoulders. "Then I'll help. Daddy always said good people have to stand up to bad people, even when it's scary." Over the next 6 months, Marcus worked closely with the FBI to build an airtight case. Emma received intensive therapy to help her process her memories safely, and slowly, piece by piece, she provided testimony that corroborated the evidence they'd gathered. The investigation revealed the full scope of Victor's crimes: $237 million stolen over 15 years, 17 fraudulent investment schemes, and evidence of at least 3 other accidents involving people who'd gotten too close to the truth. Marcus established a victim restitution fund using 40% of his personal fortune, ensuring that families who'd lost everything to Victor's schemes would be compensated. It wouldn't bring back Robert and Diana, but it honored their memory and their belief in doing what was right. When Victor Harrison was finally arrested at his private airport, attempting to flee to a non-extradition country, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he'd been carrying for 3 years without knowing it. Justice wouldn't bring Emma's parents back, but it ensured that their sacrifice had meaning. And for the first time since that stormy night when Emma appeared at his door, Marcus could sleep peacefully, knowing the nightmare was finally over. With Victor Harrison behind bars awaiting trial on multiple federal charges, Marcus began the most challenging journey of his life, learning to be a father. The legal process of adopting Emma would take 8 months, but the emotional process of becoming a family started immediately. The mansion that had once felt like a mausoleum slowly transformed into a home. Emma's artwork appeared on refrigerator doors. Children's books filled previously pristine shelves, and the sound of laughter echoed through halls that had known only silence for decades. But healing wasn't linear. Some days, Emma would wake up, screaming from nightmares about the bad man coming back. Other days, she would retreat into herself, testing whether Marcus would abandon her like everyone else had. The trained therapists had warned him that trauma didn't disappear with the removal of its source. It required patience, consistency, and unconditional love. "I'm broken," Emma whispered one evening after a particularly difficult day, triggered by a news report about Victor's case. She sat curled in Marcus's lap, small and fragile in her unicorn pajamas. "You're not broken, sweetheart," Marcus said gently, stroking her hair. "You're healing. There's a difference. But what if I never get better? What if I always have nightmares and sad days?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. "Emma, do you know why I work so much?" She shook her head against his chest. "For 15 years, I worked all the time because I was trying to fill a hole inside me. I thought if I made enough money, achieved enough success, I wouldn't feel empty anymore. But the hole just got bigger." Emma tilted her head to look at him. "What changed?" "You did when you showed up at my door." You didn't fill the hole. You helped me realize I didn't need to carry it alone anymore. Having sad days doesn't make you broken, Emma. It makes you human." Progress came in small victories. Emma's first day at the private school Marcus had chosen went better than expected. She made a friend, a quiet boy named Alex, whose parents had divorced, creating an instant bond between two children navigating family changes. Marcus learned to navigate parent-teacher conferences, school plays, and the intricate social dynamics of 8-year-old friendships. He discovered that building a blanket fort was more complex than negotiating million-dollar contracts, and that bedtime stories required more creativity than board presentations. Most importantly, he learned that love wasn't something you achieved, it was something you practiced daily, through 1,000 small acts of care and presence. The renovation of Thompson Industries proved equally challenging. Marcus had built his reputation on aggressive growth and profit maximization. Now, guided by the values Robert Winters had tried to teach him, he began the slow process of transforming his company into a model of corporate responsibility. He established an ethics committee with real authority to review all investments. He implemented transparency measures that went far beyond legal requirements. He hired a new team of executives who shared his commitment to ethical business practices, even when it meant smaller profits. The financial press was skeptical. Stock prices dipped as investors worried about Marcus's new direction. Some board members resigned, unable to adapt to the company's ethical transformation. But Marcus persevered, motivated by a different kind of success metric. Instead of measuring only profits, he began tracking the positive impact his company had on communities, employees, and society. Emma noticed the changes at home. "You seem happier now," she observed one evening as they worked on a jigsaw puzzle. "Together, I am happier," Marcus realized with surprise. "Even though the company makes less money, money can't buy the important things, sweetheart. I learned that from your father, and I'm learning it again from you." The adoption paperwork progressed slowly through the courts. Background checks, home visits, psychological evaluation, submitted to every requirement with grace. Understanding that the system was designed to protect children like Emma. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the court-appointed psychologist, conducted her final evaluation on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. She watched Marcus and Emma bake cookies together, observing their natural interactions. "How do you feel about Marcus becoming your legal father?" she asked Emma during their private session. Emma considered the question seriously. "He doesn't try to replace my real daddy. He just loves me for who I am now, even on my bad days." "And what does family mean to you?" "Family means someone who chooses to stay, even when things get hard. Marcus chose me, and I choose him too." When the psychologist delivered her recommendation to the court, her report was unequivocal. Marcus Thompson and Emma Winters were already a family in every way that mattered. The legal recognition would simply make official what love had already accomplished. As autumn turned to winter, Marcus found himself looking forward to Christmas for the first time in decades, not because of business opportunities or networking events, but because Emma had never experienced a Christmas peaches with someone who truly wanted her there. They spent weekends shopping for decorations, arguing playfully about whether the tree should be traditional or contemporary, and planning a holiday menu that included both elegant dishes and Emma's beloved mac and cheese. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Thompson was building something that couldn't be measured in dollars. He was building a family. The adoption ceremony took place on a crisp January morning, 14 months after Emma had first appeared at Marcus's door. Unlike the dramatic courtroom scenes depicted in movies, the actual event was refreshingly bureaucratic. Small conference room in the family court building, fluorescent lighting, and a judge who treated the proceedings with professional warmth rather than theatrical emotion. But for Marcus and Emma, the simplicity made it more meaningful, not less. Judge Patricia Henley reviewed the extensive documentation one final time: evaluations, home studies, background checks, and dozens of character references. Emma sat beside Marcus in her best dress, a navy blue outfit they'd chosen together, her small hand firmly clasped in his. "Mr. Thompson," Judge Henley began, "do you understand that adoption creates a permanent legal relationship between you and Emma, that you're accepting full responsibility for her welfare, education, and development until she reaches adulthood?" "I do, Your Honor, and beyond adulthood, if she have me." Emma squeezed his hand, and Marcus caught her small smile. Emma, the judge continued, you're old enough to understand what's happening today. Do you want Marcus Thompson to become your legal father? Emma stood up, surprising everyone with her formality. Yes, Your Honor, very much. He's already been my dad in every way that matters. Today just makes it official. Judge Henley's professional demeanor softened slightly. In that case, by the power vested in me by the state of California, I hereby grant the petition for adoption. Emma Winters, you are now legally Emma Thompson, with all the rights and protections that relationship entails. The gavel came down, with a quiet thud that somehow echoed like thunder in Marcus's chest. They celebrated quietly at home, with a small gathering. Dr. Martinez, Agent Chen, who had become a family friend, Emma's tutor, Mrs. Rodriguez, and Alex's family from school. Nothing elaborate, just people who had supported them through the journey, sharing cake and witnessing this new beginning. How does it feel to be Emma Thompson? Alex asked during the party. Emma considered the question with her characteristic seriousness. It feels like I finally have a last name that belongs to me, not just one that got assigned to me. That evening, after their guests had gone home, Marcus found Emma in the library where she'd first slept on that stormy night. She was updating her nameplate on her bookshelf, carefully writing Emma Thompson in her best handwriting. Any regrets? Marcus asked, settling into the chair beside her. About the adoption? Never. Emma looked up from her writing. But Marcus, I hope it's okay that I still want to remember my first parents too. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Emma, your love for Robert and Diana doesn't diminish what we have. If anything, it makes me love you more, knowing you have such a loyal heart. Good, Emma said with relief. Because I was thinking we could visit their graves this weekend. I want to tell them about today. They went that Saturday, bringing fresh flowers to the modest cemetery where Robert and Diana Winters rested side by side. Emma knelt between the headstones, her voice soft but clear as she spoke to parents who could no longer answer. Hi, Mummy. Hi, Daddy. I wanted you to know I'm okay now. Marcus adopted me today, so I'm Emma Thompson now, but I'm still your little girl too. Marcus knew Daddy from work, and he's teaching me the same things about being good and honest that Daddy taught him. Marcus stood back, giving Emma space for this private conversation, but he could hear every word. The bad man can't hurt anyone anymore. Marcus and the police made sure of that. And Marcus promises he'll never leave me, no matter what. I think you'd like that he keeps his promises. Emma placed a flower on each grave, then stood and slipped her hand into Marcus's. They're proud of us, she said with quiet certainty. As they walked back to the car, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 20 months ago, he'd been a man who measured success only in dollars and market share. Today, he was a father whose greatest achievement was earning the trust of a traumatized little girl, Thompson. Industries had indeed become more profitable under its new ethical guidelines, not less, as the skeptics had predicted. Clients trusted a company that operated with transparency and integrity. Employees worked harder for a leader who valued people over just profits. The business transformation had taken 2 full years, but it was complete. More importantly, Marcus had discovered that success wasn't something you accumulated, was something you shared. What do you want to do tomorrow? He asked Emma as they drove home. Can we work on the greenhouse? I want to plant the vegetable garden we planned. Marcus smiled. Absolutely. We've got all the time in the world. For the first time in his adult life, that felt like a promise rather than a burden. Time wasn't something to be optimized for maximum productivity. It was something to be treasured and shared with the people who mattered most. Emma Thompson was home. Marcus Thompson was finally home to 2.5 years after that first stormy night. Marcus Thompson stood in his backyard watching 10-year-old Emma tend to the vegetable garden they'd planted together. The tomatoes were heavy on the vine, the lettuce crisp and green, and Emma's pride in her small harvest was infectious. Dad, look, she called, holding up a perfect carrot she'd just pulled from the earth. It's huge, Dad. The word still made Marcus's heart skip, even after hearing it hundreds of times. Emma had started using it naturally about 6 months after the adoption, and each time felt like a small miracle. That's the biggest carrot I've ever seen, Marcus agreed, joining her among the raised beds they'd built together. What do you want to do with it? Can we make carrot cake for Mrs. Rodriguez? It's her birthday next week. Marcus smiled. Emma's impulse to share good things with people she cared about was pure Robert Winters, a generous spirit that trauma couldn't destroy. There, life had settled into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and precious. Emma attended Riverside Academy, where she'd found her confidence in math and literature. She still saw Dr. Martinez monthly, not because she was broken, but because healing was an ongoing process. The nightmares had mostly stopped, replaced by dreams of new adventures and possibilities. Thomson Industries had become a model for ethical business practices. Featured in Harvard Business School case studies and industry publications, Marcus took pride in the company's transformation. But his greatest satisfaction came from much simpler things: parent-teacher conferences where teachers praised Emma's kindness, bedtime stories that stretched longer than planned, and Sunday mornings spent making pancakes while debating whether chocolate chips counted as a fruit. "Dad," Emma said suddenly, setting down her gardening tools, "I've been thinking about something." Marcus had learned to take Emma's thinking seriously. At 10, she possessed an emotional intelligence that often surprised adults. "What's on your mind? There are other kids like me, aren't there? Kids whose parents died, who bounce around different families." Marcus nodded carefully. "I was lucky, because I remembered your name and found you. But what about kids who don't have anyone to look for?" Marcus felt his chest tighten with pride and something deeper. "What are you suggesting?" Emma wiped dirt from her hands, her expression serious and determined. "Could we help them? Maybe not adopt everyone, but help them find good families, or at least help them feel less alone." The idea hit Marcus like lightning. For months, he'd been considering how to expand Thomson Industries' charitable giving. Emma had just provided the answer he'd been searching for without knowing it. "Emma, that's brilliant. We could create a foundation, something that helps connect children with families who'll love them." "The Robert and Diana Winters Foundation," Emma said immediately. "To honor my first parents." Marcus knelt beside her in the garden, looking into those blue eyes that had first captured his heart. "You want to help other children because of what you went through. I want to help them because I know what it feels like to be scared and alone, and I know how amazing it feels to find someone who chooses you and never gives up on you." That evening, Marcus called his lawyers and began the process of establishing the foundation. It would take months to organize properly, but Emma's vision was clear: a program that combined financial support with emotional guidance, helping children in foster care while training families to provide the stability and love every child deserved. 6 months later, the foundation held its first fundraising gala. Emma, now 11, gave a short speech that left few dry eyes in the ballroom. "Every child deserves someone who will read them bedtime stories, help with homework, and promise never to give up on them," she said, her voice clear and confident. "My dad found me during a storm, but together we learned that families aren't just born, they're chosen and built with love." As Marcus watched Emma work the room afterward, naturally connecting with potential donors and volunteers, he marveled at the journey that had brought them here. A lost little girl and a man who'd forgotten how to love had somehow found each other and created something beautiful. The foundation would go on to help hundreds of children find permanent families. Thomson Industries would continue to thrive under ethical leadership, but Marcus's greatest legacy would always be Emma's daughter, who taught him that the most important investments couldn't be measured in dollars, only in love shared and promises kept. Standing in their garden that first evening, watching Emma plan ways to help other children, Marcus finally understood what Robert Winters had tried to teach him years ago. True success wasn't about what you accumulated, but what you gave away. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, what you gave away found its way back to you, transformed into something infinitely more valuable: a family built on choice, nurtured by love, and strengthened by the simple promise to never let go.